Welcome to Exquisite Stories. She got pregnant with triplets for the crippled billionaire. The night air was thick with anticipation as Lily Harris stepped out of the limousine and onto the red carpet. The venue for tonight's charity gala was nothing short of magnificent, with shimmering chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and the soft hum of orchestral music floating through the air. A sea of elegantly dressed people mingled, their laughter and conversation blending with the sound of clinking glasses. But for Lily, it all felt like a dream, a world she didn't quite belong to. She was here on invitation, but every step she took, every glance she received, reminded her that she was an outsider in this glittering world. Her heels clicked against the polished marble floor as she moved through the crowd, the cool bite of the evening air creeping in through the large open doors. She tugged at the edges of her deep crimson dress, trying to ease the discomfort gnawing at her. She wasn't the type to stand out, but tonight, with her striking red dress and dark hair pinned just so, she felt like she might. It was then that she saw him. At the far end of the grand ballroom, seated at a sleek, black-and-glass table, was Mason Montgomery. Even from this distance, Lily could see the power he commanded. His sharp features and dark eyes drew attention wherever he went, but it wasn't just his appearance that turned heads. It was the air of quiet mystery surrounding him. The billionaire was known for many things, his immense fortune, his ruthless business dealings, and, most of all, for the tragic accident that had left him in a wheelchair. Yet, there was something magnetic about him, something that made everyone else fade into the background when he was near. Lily's heart fluttered in her chest as her eyes locked onto his. For a moment, she swore he was staring directly at her. A flicker of recognition crossed his gaze, but it was quickly replaced by an unreadable expression. He didn't smile, nor did he seem interested in the crowd that surrounded him. He was a man of solitude, a man who had grown accustomed to his own company and the distance that came with his disability. Curiosity stirred within her, and before she could think twice, Lily found herself walking toward him, the soft rhythm of her heart growing louder with each step. She told herself it was just to make small talk, to politely acknowledge the man who held the key to much of the city's fortune. But deep down, she knew there was something else, a magnetic pull she couldn't deny. As she approached, a soft but commanding voice stopped her in her tracks. Lily Harris. She turned, startled, to find Mason watching her. His voice had a smooth, velvety quality, but there was an undercurrent of something darker, a hint of pain that she could almost taste in the air between them. "I wasn't sure you would come," he said, his eyes studying her with an intensity that made her heart race. There was no pretension in his tone, just a quiet sincerity. "I heard you were invited, but you don't strike me as someone who enjoys events like this." Lily blinked, unsure whether she was relieved or overwhelmed. "I usually don't," she admitted, her voice soft. "But, it's for a good cause." He nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "A good cause indeed. But there's something else, isn't there?" He gave her a knowing smile, one that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "You've been staring at me for the past few minutes. Care to explain?" Her cheeks flushed, the heat rising in her face. She was caught off guard by his bluntness, but she didn't look away. "I wasn't staring," she said, her voice playful despite the nervousness in her chest. "I just couldn't help but notice how out of place I feel in a room like this." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You seem like someone who belongs. But it's understandable. People like me are used to having a certain effect on others." His words were a bit sharp, but there was something about the way he spoke that hinted at a deeper pain. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but the more she stood there, the more she wanted to know him, to understand the man behind the billionaire facade. "I don't think it's you that makes me feel out of place," she said softly, meeting his gaze. "It's this whole world. It's intimidating." Mason chuckled softly, a sound that was rich with experience. "This world is nothing more than an illusion. Don't be fooled by it." Her curiosity piqued, she took a step closer. "You don't like it here, do you?" He paused for a moment, the faintest shadow crossing his expression. Not much. But sometimes, the best way to control your life is to be seen in places like this. Lily felt a pang of empathy for him, a man who had once commanded the world, but now seemed to be trying to hide his wounds beneath the polished surface. Before she could stop herself, she spoke the words that had been bubbling inside her. "Why do you come, then? If you hate it so much?" His eyes softened for a brief moment, as if her question had touched something buried deep within him. "Because I need to remind myself of what I've lost." The vulnerability in his words struck a chord in Lily, and suddenly, the grand ballroom and its glittering guests faded into the background. It was just the two of them, standing alone in the midst of a crowd that no longer seemed to matter. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice quiet, her hand unconsciously reaching out toward him. "I didn't mean to." He held up his hand, silencing her gently. "You haven't said anything wrong. In fact, I'm glad you came over." Lily felt a rush of warmth spread through her chest at his words. It was as if, for the first time, he wasn't hiding behind the walls he'd built around himself. There was a raw honesty in his presence, something that both unnerved and intrigued her. And then, without warning, the night took a sharp turn. "I'm not used to this," Mason said, his voice low, his gaze flicking to the crowd. "But if you're willing to spend more time with me tonight, I think I could use a distraction." Lily hesitated, unsure of what he meant. But there was something about his vulnerability, the way he had allowed her to see behind the mask of the billionaire, that made her heart race. Maybe it was the connection she felt, or maybe it was the desire to break through the walls that surrounded him. "I'm here," she said, her voice steady. "If you want to talk." Mason's lips curved into a smile, small, but genuine. "I'd like that, Lily." Lily woke up with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. The light streaming through the curtains was soft, the kind of light that made everything look gentle and calm. But her mind was racing, and as the reality of the previous night set in, the weight of it all made her feel dizzy. The gala, the people, the endless champagne, everything seemed like a dream now. But one thing was real. One thing had changed her life in a way she could never undo. The night she'd met Mason Montgomery. Lily pressed her hand to her stomach, the faintest flutter of nerves running through her. She had been late for her period, but she had chalked it up to stress, long hours at work, life in the city, the usual things. But now, there was something different. Her phone buzzed beside her bed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend, Camila. "Hey, just checking in. How's the gala? Did you meet someone special?" Lily smiled softly, her fingers lingering over the keys before she typed a reply. "Something happened, Cam. I think it was a bit more than special." There was no point in avoiding the truth. She was pregnant. The thought sent a rush of heat through her, but it wasn't the excitement or joy she had expected. It was the overwhelming reality of being responsible for not one, but 3 new lives. Her hands trembled as she placed the phone down on her bed. 3. Triplets. She had no idea how it happened, none of it made sense. But she couldn't ignore it. The faint nausea that had started over the past week was the final clue, and a trip to the doctor confirmed what she already feared. The father was Mason Montgomery, the tall, handsome billionaire she had spent that one unforgettable evening with. The same man who had seemed so far out of her league, so untouchable. A man known not just for his fortune but for the tragedy that had left him in a wheelchair. Mason Montgomery was a figure in the world of business and luxury. But now, for better or worse, he was tied to her in a way neither of them could have ever expected. The thought of telling him was terrifying. He'd barely spoken to her at the gala, only a few words exchanged, some light banter, but nothing beyond that. He had made it clear that he preferred solitude, and the weight of his own challenges seemed to keep him at a distance from everyone, even in the brightest of settings. But she couldn't keep it a secret forever. She needed to find a way to tell him, and soon. There was no turning back. Lily stood up and paced around her apartment, her thoughts a whirlwind. The life she had been building, her plans for the future, all of it felt uncertain now. She had always been independent, always in control of her life, but this was something different. This was something bigger than her. With a deep breath, she picked up the phone and dialed Mason's number. The phone rang twice before he answered. Hello. His voice was deeper than she remembered, calm, measured. Mr. Montgomery, it's Lily Harris, she began, trying to steady her voice. I need to talk to you about something important. There was a brief silence on the other end, and then he spoke again, his tone curious but distant. Lily, is everything okay? She could hear the skepticism in his voice, and it made her nervous, but she pushed forward. I'm pregnant, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And the babies, they're yours. All three of them. Another long pause followed, the silence stretching far longer than she was comfortable with. It felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on her, the words hanging between them in the air. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer now. 3. His tone was almost incredulous. Are you sure? I'm sure, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I've been to the doctor, Mason. I'm pregnant with triplets. And you're the father. There was another pause, and then Mason sighed, a sound of frustration and disbelief. I didn't mean for this to happen, he said quietly. But I'll help. I'll do whatever needs to be done. You're not in this alone. Lily's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she wasn't sure if she had heard him correctly. He had just offered to help. To be there. But, what does that mean, exactly? She asked, her voice trembling with emotion she hadn't expected. I don't know how to do this on my own. I'm scared, Mason. I'm scared of doing this without help. Without someone who understands what this is like. Mason's voice softened further, and she could hear a faint trace of sincerity in it. I'm scared too, Lily. I didn't expect this. But I want to be there. I want to be part of this, of their lives. Lily let out a shaky breath, the weight of the situation settling in. I don't know what to do next. We'll figure it out together, he said. Let's talk more. In person. Lily's heart skipped a beat. The thought of seeing him again, of being in the same room with him, filled her with both dread and hope. She had never expected Mason Montgomery to be so open. So willing to take on this responsibility. And yet, here he was, telling her he would be there. We can meet tomorrow, she said, her voice more confident now. I'll come to you. All right, Mason agreed. I'll see you then. As she hung up the phone, Lily felt a sense of relief wash over her. This wasn't going to be easy. But maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone in this as she had thought. The cafe was quiet, with only the soft hum of background chatter and the clink of cups on saucers. The flickering candlelight between them illuminated the earnest expressions on both Lily and Mason's faces as they sat across from each other, the air thick with the weight of the conversation. Lily's heart was racing, yet there was something comforting about the peacefulness of the setting. Here, in this quiet corner of the world, they could finally have an honest conversation. Lily set down her cup of tea and took a steadying breath. Her fingers brushed over the edge of her mug, and she looked at Mason, whose calm demeanor masked the uncertainty she could feel simmering beneath the surface. So, she began, her voice softer than she intended, I guess we need to talk about what happens next. Mason's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. His dark eyes softened, a mix of resolve and something else she couldn't quite place. He hadn't been what she expected. She had thought, maybe, he would be angry or dismissive, or maybe even overwhelmed. But he wasn't. He was quiet, careful in his words, and surprisingly open. I've been thinking about that too, he replied, his voice low and thoughtful. It's a lot. More than I expected, honestly. But I want to make sure we approach this in a way that's best for you, and for the kids. He paused for a moment, his fingers tapping the rim of his cup as if weighing his next words. I want to be involved, Lily. I don't want you to go through this alone. Lily felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest. There was something in his voice, something genuine, that reassured her. But she wasn't sure how to feel about all of this. She had always been independent. The thought of asking someone to be there, to rely on someone else, felt foreign. And yet, in this moment, she couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. I don't know if I can do this, she confessed, her voice shaking slightly. I've never had to depend on anyone for anything. And now I'm responsible for 3 little lives. Her hands clenched around the edges of her cup, her knuckles turning white. It's terrifying. I'm not sure I'm ready for this. Mason watched her for a long moment, his expression softening. You don't have to do this alone, he said quietly. We'll figure it out together. I'll be here. For you. For the kids. Lily met his gaze, unsure what to say. She had always prided herself on being strong, on not needing anyone. But now, the enormity of her situation made her feel small, vulnerable. She wasn't sure if she was ready to trust someone like Mason, someone with so many layers, so much history. But something about him, something about the sincerity in his words, made her wonder if this was the chance to let someone in. I don't know what this will look like, she said, her voice trembling. But I'm willing to try if you are. Mason nodded, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. We don't have to have all the answers right now. But we can take it one step at a time. And I'll be there for every step, no matter how small. For a moment, there was silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, it was a quiet understanding that settled in the space. Lily felt a weight lift off her shoulders, just a little. She wasn't entirely sure how they would navigate this new chapter of their lives, but having Mason there, offering his support, made the impossible seem a little more possible. So, what now? Lily asked, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of her cup. Mason leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. Now, we start planning. We'll figure out the logistics. When you're ready, we'll visit the doctor together. We'll start thinking about how to arrange everything. And maybe, we'll even talk about what role we'll both play in their lives. His voice was steady, with a hint of determination. I want to be involved, Lily. This is my responsibility, too. The words hung in the air between them, and for the first time, Lily felt a sense of hope. It wasn't the same kind of hope she'd felt before, not the kind that came with dreams of success or a life of independence. It was a quieter, more fragile hope, the kind that came with the promise of shared responsibility, of stepping into the unknown with someone by her side. Okay, she said after a long pause, her voice steady now. Let's do this. Together. The weeks passed quickly, each day bringing new challenges and new moments of connection between Lily and Mason. The initial shock of the pregnancy had worn off, but the reality of raising triplets still seemed like a distant, almost surreal idea. Lily's world had shifted in ways she never expected, but she found herself starting to lean into the changes. Mason, despite his initial reservation, had proven to be more involved than she ever imagined. He attended every doctor's appointment, helped her with logistics, and always made sure she had what she needed, whether it was a comforting word or a practical solution. One sunny afternoon, Mason drove Lily to a quiet park near the edge of the city. They sat on a bench beneath a canopy of trees, the soft rustling of the leaves in the wind creating a peaceful soundtrack to their conversation. I never thought I'd be here, Mason said quietly, his eyes scanning the horizon. I never thought I'd be planning for something this big. You know, with the business and everything, I've always kept my focus narrow, just building my empire. But now, it feels different. I think about the future, and it's not just about business anymore. It's about family. Lily smiled softly at him, her hand resting on her round belly. It's crazy, right? I mean, we're talking about 3 babies. I'm still processing all of this. Mason nodded. I know. It's a lot. But we're going to be okay, Lily. We'll figure this out. I want to be there for you, for the kids. You're not alone in this. His words felt sincere, and in that moment, Lily felt a deep sense of gratitude. It wasn't easy to trust someone so quickly, especially with something as monumental as this, but Mason's actions had slowly begun to prove that he meant what he said. He had been there for her in ways she hadn't expected. I'm glad you're here, she said softly, her voice full of quiet appreciation. I don't think I could do this without you. I've always been independent, but I guess we all need someone sometimes. Mason looked at her, his gaze steady and sincere. I think we all do. And I'm not going anywhere. The sun began to set, casting a golden light over the park as they sat there together, the weight of the future still uncertain but made a little lighter by the shared responsibility they now carried. The nursery was almost finished. The soft pastel-colored walls were adorned with gentle animal-themed murals, and a row of cribs lined one side of the room, each waiting patiently for the little ones to arrive. Lily stood in the doorway, her hand resting on her stomach as she surveyed the space. Every item in the room had been chosen with care, every detail planned out as they prepared for the arrival of their triplets. Mason had become more involved than she could have ever imagined. Not only had he helped with the nursery, but he'd also been there for every doctor's appointment, every step of the way. His presence had shifted from a distant formality to someone she could genuinely rely on. Still, there was a lingering feeling of uncertainty in her heart. What would it really be like to raise 3 children at once? How would their lives change once the babies arrived? And, most pressing, what would Mason's role truly be once the babies were born? Mason? Lily called out, stepping into the living room. He was seated by the large bay window, looking out at the setting sun, his hands clasped together in his lap. It was rare for Mason to be still, to let his guard down, but moments like these were growing more frequent. Yeah, he said, turning to her with a soft smile. Lily joined him, sitting down beside him on the plush couch. The evening light cast a warm glow over the room, and for a moment, everything felt calm, peaceful, almost too calm. The storm of their new reality was still ahead. Do you ever think about what life will be like once they're here? She asked quietly, her voice hesitant. Mason's gaze softened as he looked at her. I do, he admitted. A lot, actually. He paused, his expression thoughtful. I've spent so much time building my empire, focusing on my career, my independence. But now, it's different. Now, I'm thinking about our future, about these babies. I want to be the best father I can be. I want to be there for you, for them. Lily felt a wave of emotion wash over her, a mixture of relief and hope. She had never expected this, never imagined that Mason would take on such an active role in their lives. But the man sitting beside her wasn't the aloof billionaire she had first met. He was someone else, someone real, someone willing to step into a role he hadn't planned for. I'm glad you're here, she said softly, her hand finding his. It's been a lot for me to process, and I don't think I could do this without you. Mason squeezed her hand gently, his voice steady. You don't have to do this alone, Lily. I'm here, every step of the way. The days leading up to the triplets' birth were filled with a quiet, nervous energy. Lily had spent most of her time organizing, packing, and mentally preparing for the whirlwind of parenting. Though Mason had been there every step of the way, a part of her still felt the weight of the responsibility resting solely on her shoulders. It was hard to imagine what life would look like after their babies arrived. The uncertainty hung over her like a cloud, but there was also excitement, a sense of joy at the thought of becoming a mother, of seeing Mason as a father. One evening, a few days before her due date, Lily and Mason sat together in their living room, surrounded by the soft glow of the lights and the hum of the city outside. Lily had her feet propped up on the coffee table, a habit that had become part of her nightly routine in the final weeks of her pregnancy. Mason sat beside her, flipping through a book on baby care, though his attention was often diverted to the gentle movement of her belly. "You're starting to show signs, Lily," Mason said, his voice a mix of amusement and concern. "I think they'll be here any day now." Lily nodded, though the excitement in her heart was tempered by a sense of nervousness. "I know," she replied, her voice softer than usual. "I'm both terrified and thrilled. I've never felt so many emotions at once." Mason turned to her, his expression serious but soft. "I'll be there for you. Every step of the way. You don't have to face this alone, not for a second." Lily gave him a small smile, her hand resting over her belly. "I know," she whispered, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I'm glad you're here. You've made this whole experience feel less overwhelming." Mason reached over and gently placed his hand over hers, his fingers warm and reassuring. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he asked, his voice low, almost contemplative. Lily nodded again, her eyes meeting his. "We have. From that one night, to this moment. It's been unexpected, but somehow, it feels right." As they sat together in comfortable silence, the weight of the future loomed, but so did the promise of something beautiful, a family, a shared future, and the bond that had grown between them in the midst of chaos. The first few weeks after the triplets' birth were a whirlwind of diapers, feedings, and sleepless nights. Lily and Mason had prepared for this moment in many ways, but nothing. "It's time." Lily's contractions have become more intense, and Mason rushes her to the hospital, both of them feeling the adrenaline of the impending birth. The hospital room is prepared for the arrival of the triplets, and the doctors are ready to assist. Mason stands by Lily's side as she is prepared for delivery, his presence a calming force amidst the flurry of nurses and medical staff. There's a mix of excitement, fear, and anticipation in the air. Lily grips Mason's hand tightly, knowing that her life, their lives, are about to change forever. The moment has arrived. Lily, exhausted but filled with determination, pushes through the contractions as the doctors guide her. Mason is by her side, holding her hand, speaking words of encouragement. The room is filled with the sounds of medical instruments and soft voices, but the focus is on the birth of their children. When the first baby arrives, there's a collective sigh of relief, followed by the sound of a baby's first cry. Then, one by one, the triplets are born, each one welcomed into the world with love and joy. Lily and Mason share a tearful, joyous moment as they gaze at their newborn children. After the triplets are cleaned and settled, Lily and Mason sit together in the hospital room, the three tiny babies lying in bassinets beside them. There's a peaceful quiet as they gaze at their children, the exhaustion of the birth fading as they take in the reality of parenthood. Mason looks at Lily with a look of awe, realizing just how much their lives have changed. "They're here," he whispers, a smile spreading across his face. Lily, overcome with emotion, nods and says, "Our family is here." The first night at home with the triplets is both a moment of peace and chaos. The nursery is ready, and Lily and Mason spend the night in the rocking chairs, taking turns feeding and comforting the babies. The soft lullabies play in the background, and they share quiet moments together. Holding their children, whispering to them, marveling at the tiny miracles in their arms. Mason, who had always been a man of strength and control, finds himself overcome with emotion at the responsibility of being a father. But in this moment, with Lily by his side and their children in their arms, he feels more complete than he ever has before. Could have fully prepared them for the reality of raising three newborns at once. Every day felt like a new challenge, but it was also filled with moments of joy and wonder that made all the sleepless nights worth it. The nursery, once carefully arranged and pristine, now had an almost lived-in feel to it. The cribs were full, and the soft sound of lullabies filled the room. The triplets had their own distinct personalities already. Sophie was the quiet one, often content to sleep peacefully. Jackson was more vocal, always alert and curious. And then there was little Ava, the smallest, but with a fiery spirit that would surprise anyone who met her. Lily and Mason found themselves adjusting to a new rhythm, one that didn't come with any instructions. They worked together, balancing responsibilities. Mason would take the late-night shifts when he wasn't attending to business matters, while Lily would handle the daytime feedings and routines. Their lives had completely changed, but through it all, they had each other. One morning, as Lily sat on the couch, feeding Sophie, she watched Mason in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the two of them. His movements were steady, focused. He was no longer the busy billionaire consumed by his empire, he was a father now, and a devoted one at that. "Everything okay in here?" Mason asked, walking over with a tray of toast and coffee. Lily smiled up at him, a tired but contented smile. "Yeah, just a little quiet moment before the chaos starts again." Mason sat down beside her, carefully placing the tray on the coffee table. He gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face, his touch soft and tender. "You're doing an incredible job, Lily," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "I know it's not easy, but you're amazing." Lily chuckled softly, her eyes looking at him with gratitude. "We're doing it together. You've been a rock through all of this." Mason smiled, but there was a hint of something deeper in his eyes, something more vulnerable. "I never imagined being a father would feel like this. It's harder than I thought, but it's also the best thing I've ever done." The words hung in the air, and Lily felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had known Mason for months now, and she had seen his growth in ways she never anticipated. The man who had once been guarded, focused solely on his empire, was now fully present, fully invested in this new chapter of their lives. She had witnessed the depth of his love for their children, and it filled her heart in a way she couldn't describe. Before they could say more, a faint cry interrupted their quiet moment. Ava, as usual, was ready for attention. Lily sighed, standing up and adjusting Sophie in her arms. "And here comes the chaos." Mason chuckled, standing up as well. "Let's tackle this together." The days were a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and sleepless nights. But despite the exhaustion, Lily and Mason began to notice the tiny, precious milestones that made the chaos worth it. Every time their triplets reached a new stage, whether it was a smile, a sound, or even a first rollover, it felt like a celebration. It was as if each moment was a little victory in their journey as new parents. The triplets were nearing their third month, and Lily was in the nursery, changing Sophie's diaper when it happened. Sophie, who had been the most quiet and calm of the three, suddenly rolled over for the first time. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she watched her daughter move for the first time without help. It was small, but it felt monumental. She immediately called Mason over, and the two of them watched, in awe, as their baby girl explored her new skill. They cheered, took pictures, and marveled at how fast their babies were growing. It was a moment of joy amid the chaos, a small reminder of how far they had come together. Their bedroom, softly lit, with the sound of a quiet night outside. After weeks of adjusting to life with three newborns, Lily and Mason finally had their first night alone together in weeks. The triplets were peacefully asleep in their nursery, and the house was quiet, eerily quiet. For the first time in what felt like forever, there were no cries, no feedings, no baby monitor blaring. Just them. Together. Lily sat on the bed, her legs tucked underneath her as she glanced at Mason. He was sitting beside her, looking as exhausted as she felt. His suit had been replaced by something more comfortable, and his once stiff posture was now relaxed. They had both been so caught up in the whirlwind of parenthood that they hadn't realized just how much they missed the simplicity of quiet moments together. "It's strange, isn't it?" Lily said softly, breaking the silence. "How quiet it is now. It almost feels too peaceful." Mason chuckled lightly. It's been a long time since we've had a moment like this. He turned to her, his gaze softening. But I wouldn't trade what we have for anything. Lily smiled, her hand finding his. I'm glad you're here, Mason. I don't think I could do this without you. Mason squeezed her hand, his expression becoming serious. We're in this together. Always. For the first time in weeks, they were able to just be, no demands, no schedules, just them, sharing the peaceful silence of their home. In that moment, everything felt perfect. Even though the chaos of parenting would inevitably return, they knew they had something even stronger to rely on, each other. As the weeks passed, the reality of parenthood began to settle in for Lily and Mason. The initial shock had worn off, and now they were living the day-to-day of caring for their 3 newborns. The triplets had become a little family of their own, with their distinct personalities slowly emerging. Sophie was the quiet observer, Jackson was the curious one, and Ava, the tiniest, was always full of energy. Despite the exhaustion, there was something special about the chaos. There were the early morning feedings, the midnight cries, and the constant juggling of tasks. But there was also the joy of watching their children grow, even in the smallest ways, like Sophie's first smile or Jackson's adorable gurgles. Every day brought something new, something to celebrate, and Lily and Mason learned to embrace it all. One evening, as they sat in the living room after a particularly long day, they found a moment of peace. The babies were finally asleep, and the house, for once, was quiet. Mason turned to Lily, a tired smile on his face. "How do you do it?" he asked, his voice filled with admiration. "How do you handle everything with so much grace?" Lily looked at him, her eyes softening. "I don't know if I have grace, Mason. But I have you. And that makes all the difference." Mason's expression softened as he reached out and gently took her hand. "I'm glad I can be here for you. For them. For us." Lily squeezed his hand, her heart full. "Me too." It wasn't easy. Parenting 3 babies at once was overwhelming at times, but it was also the most rewarding thing they'd ever done. And through it all, they had each other, through the sleepless nights, the challenges, and the unspoken moments of joy. The morning routine was a well-oiled machine by now. Lily and Mason worked in tandem, preparing breakfast while also tending to the baby's needs. Mason made coffee and set the table while Lily fed the triplets in the high chairs. The kitchen was filled with laughter, the sound of clinking plates, and the occasional giggle from one of the babies. The scene reflects the growing rhythm of their lives together, busy, but full of love and teamwork. It's a chaotic, beautiful dance of parenthood. After what feels like endless nights of waking up to feed and comfort the triplets, Lily and Mason finally get a full night's sleep. The babies are peacefully resting in their cribs, and the house is quiet. For the first time in weeks, Lily and Mason lay in their bed, exhausted but content. They talk softly about their hopes for the future, their dreams for the triplets, and how much their lives have changed. The scene ends with them holding each other, grateful for the quiet, but knowing that tomorrow will bring more challenges, and more joy. Mood, peaceful, intimate, reflective. The living room, cozy and dimly lit. After a long week, Lily and Mason decide to have a family movie night. The triplets are sleeping soundly in their nursery, and the 2 of them settle in on the couch, snuggling under a blanket. Mason puts on an old movie, and they both laugh at the familiar scenes. The comfort of each other's presence, the quiet of the night, and the joy of just being together create a perfect moment. Despite the challenges, they realize how much they've come to appreciate these quiet nights, knowing they are building a life full of memories together. The backyard, in the late afternoon. Lily and Mason sit together on a bench in their backyard, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the garden. The triplets are napping inside, and the couple takes a moment to reflect on how far they've come. From their unexpected first meeting to the birth of their children, they've experienced so much in such a short time. They talk about their fears, their hopes, and the future they are building together. There's a sense of peace as they share this quiet moment, knowing that whatever challenges lie ahead, they'll face them together. Time had begun to stretch and blur for Lily and Mason. The sleepless nights no longer felt new, they were simply part of life now. Feedings, diaper changes, soothing lullabies at 3 a.m., they had learned to navigate it all with a kind of quiet determination. But what surprised them most wasn't how tired they were, it was how deeply they had grown to love these little people, and how much they had grown to depend on each other. On one particularly quiet morning, Lily stood by the window, rocking Ava gently against her shoulder. The sun was rising, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. Mason rolled into the nursery, holding 2 baby bottles and smiling sleepily. Both bottles warmed, diapers stacked, burp cloths ready, he said, setting everything down with exaggerated care. Lily laughed softly. You make it sound like a mission. Everything feels like a mission when you're operating on 2 hours of sleep, Mason said, rubbing his eyes. She looked at him, his tired eyes, the gentle smile on his face, and realized how much they'd changed. Not just as parents, but as partners. Mason wasn't just the father of her children. He had become her teammate, her confidant, her home. Lily and Mason take the triplets for their 3-month checkup. The pediatrician greets them with a warm smile as the babies are weighed, measured, and carefully examined. Lily beams with pride as the doctor assures them that all 3 are healthy and developing beautifully. Mason asks thoughtful questions, taking notes on feeding schedules and developmental milestones. The moment is reassuring for both of them, they're doing something right. Their teamwork is paying off. After weeks at home, Mason returns to work for a short day. Though his office feels familiar, everything now feels different. He spends the day thinking about Lily and the babies, checking his phone for updates, smiling at pictures Lily sends him throughout the morning. When he returns home, he walks into the nursery and quietly watches Lily feed Jackson. The moment overwhelms him, not with stress, but with gratitude. He may have power in the boardroom, but his greatest role is right here, at home. Lily and Mason hire a local photographer for their first official family photo shoot. The triplets are dressed in coordinated outfits, tiny bow ties and soft dresses, while Lily and Mason coordinate their outfits with soft pastels. The photographer captures candid moments of Lily kissing Ava's forehead, Mason holding both babies in his arms, and the whole family laughing. The photo shoot is a bit chaotic, but full of laughter and love. The final portraits are beautiful, but it's the real, unscripted moments that they'll treasure the most. Balcony of their home, overlooking the city at dusk. After a long day, the babies are finally asleep, and Lily and Mason step out onto the balcony with mugs of tea in hand. The city glows beneath them, and the cool breeze offers a rare moment of peace. Wrapped in a blanket, Lily leans into Mason's shoulder as they talk about their future, school choices, travel dreams, hopes for each of their children. They don't need big promises tonight. Just this quiet moment of being together, holding hands, and looking out at the world they're building one day at a time. Thanks for watching.